All right, guys. Is this coming through okay? Yeah, it's coming through. Nice to be here with you all today. So today's talk is going to be a little bit about basketball, a little bit about Gandalf, and a little bit of math. So if all three of those bother you, then you should leave the room. No, but hopefully this will be interesting and views for you guys. So we're going to start with a guess how many jars are in the jelly bean question. So pictured here are Shaq and Kobe, who played in the Los Angeles Lakers 20 years ago. They are two of the top 10 best players of all time. They won 3 championships in a row. And the question is, where would you guess if they were to be brought, their team, 20 years into the future and played in today's National Basketball Association, out of 30 teams, where would their offense rank? As a little hint, back in the day when they played, they were 4th, 2nd, and 2nd out of 30 teams in terms of their offensive efficiency. So out of 30 teams, where do we think that they would rank today? Turns out the answer is 29th out of 30, second to last. And it's not close. There's a big, big distribution. So this team that was the best in the world 20 years ago, today would be basically the worst. So why? What happened here? Their estimation as really good players is not considered to be overly hyped. Why would they be so much worse today compared to the other teams? Well, we're going to get into it. It's these 3 charts that I'm about to show you. So number 1, these are the top 100 shot locations on a basketball court back when they were playing. So here's the basket, here's the three-point line, and the more red it is, the more shots were happening in that area. And there's a lot of shots around the basket. There's a lot of shots in this mid-range area, and then a few shots outside of this three-point line. So in the early mid-90s and the early 2000s, there was a coach in a semi-pro Italian league named Mike D'Antoni who thought, well, maybe points per shot is the better way for us to be allocating our shots rather than the likelihood of making this shot. And so he mapped out what the average points per shot were depending on where you shot on the court. And what he found was, right around the basket still is the best. But other than that, because these are worth 3 rather than 2, you're much better shooting out here. So a Mike D'Antoni offense would look like this. You'd get what you can get right next to the basket, but if you can't get it there, pull out and shoot these 3-point shots instead of the 2. So yeah, the idea is, stop this stuff. Now, so the question is this just kind of a fun theory, or did it actually impact performance? For 75 years now, the NBA has been a league that is dominated by the best talent. Unlike football, where there's 11 players on the pitch, there's only 5 players on a basketball court for your team at a time, so the best players have an outsized impact in winning championships all the time. So did this fun idea really make much of an impact? Yes. So whoever followed this Mike D'Antoni won and won and won, starting with himself. So he took over the Phoenix Suns in 2004, and when he took them over, they were ranked 24th in the league the previous year. No real changes in players, and the next year they were the best team in the whole league, even though they had these mediocre players from the year before. Moreover, in the 20 years since that year, 15 of the 20 next NBA champions in their years were on the avant-garde. They were league leaders in implementing his insights. And so you had a lot of teams win championships not with the best players. And it completely revolutionized how all of the best players started playing and focusing their efforts as a result. Bold, capitalized, and underlined. I have no other ways of emphasizing this really, really worked well. So the takeaway from this is sometimes industry best practices that have been around for decades are actually a mixed bag. And there's, and you guys talk about this all the time. I've heard from several talks that pharma is an old industry, and you guys are kind of stuck in your ways. But thinking about it, there's a very good chance that some of the stuff that your teams are doing today in commercial and promoting your products are extremely effective, and some things are not. So here's an example. This is an ROI study we did for a client where we measured the contribution to sales versus the cost of the channel of different sales or promotional channels. So we're looking at kind of the earnings return, either dollar for dollar or euro for euro, and comparing face-to-face visits with GPs, face-to-face visits with specialists. They were doing print ads and phone calls, event attendees, virtual calls, rep emails. This could be 5, 10, 15 different things. But we pull out what the actual ROI is of these different activities, and some of them weren't making any significant impact on sales at all. And then you compare that against, well, wait a minute. This is showing the last 12 months where we actually invested our funds. And this activity, the field visits with GPs, is good. That's good investment. In the short term, for every euro we put in, we're getting a euro back out in earnings. With the carryover of that in subsequent years at 85% or 80%, that's really, really good ROI. But it's only half as good as what we're doing over here with the face-to-face visits with specialists. So what if we just pull that down a little bit, boost this up with the specialists, do a little bit more with our event attendees, and the emails have a fantastic ROI, but we can't start spamming doctors, so we'll increase that, but only incrementally. If we were to do these changes, we have zero change to our total investment, but now we're making 30% more off of our investment than we were before. We're contributing that much more to the business. It's the same case as what we just saw a second ago with the shot location on the basketball court. Your brands have similar opportunities. So as we've done these now, last 3 years, several dozen studies across different brands in different countries with different pharma clients, across channels, pretty generally, but not all the time, the new digital channels that you guys are trying out are effective and are higher ROI than the traditional ones. Face-to-face is a good investment, keep doing it, but most of the time, whether it's digital ads in medical journals or Salesforce Marketing Cloud campaigns, as long as it's like an actual campaign, not just like a really basic thing, rep-triggered emails, all of these generally have a higher ROI than the field visits. With HCP specialties, it's been funny how frequently, not all the time again, but so much of the time we find that the per visit impact with the relevant specialties can be 3, 5, 10 times as big as the per visit impact with the GPs in the area. But because teams are used to being weighed and judged on how many visits per month or per year they're getting, they're setting up their target list to get the visits in, to get the counts up. Visit frequencies is another thing that we measure, kind of what's the right level of frequency per year, at what level is it not enough, and at what level are you kind of wasting the additional visits. Key messages is another thing, and looking at that by different doctors. And then in a huge way, the ROI differential by brands. So what is currently in first, second, and third position in the promo grid might not really be the best use of time in terms of what's making an actual impact with the doctors. So anyway, the takeaway is your reps, your products, your everything as it is today, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in what you currently are doing. Some of it is probably very, very good, some of it okay, and some of it not that great. And if you can measure that and identify it and focus on the stuff that's really good, there's some real opportunity there. And this has been validated. This is zip to the conclusion. Of our 2023 clients last year that we did these projects with, on average, they were able to find a 34% lift to their overall marketing ROI versus what they were doing before by virtue of measuring what was really working, what was kind of working, and focusing on the really good things. It's not because of any rocket science we were doing. We didn't introduce any new channels or any new innovative campaigns to communicate. It was just in their current mix of what they were doing. Once they were able to refocus on what was really working well, they got a lot better. And the way that we do this is something called marketing mix modeling, and specifically it's geo-segmented marketing mix modeling, where we break a country up into a couple hundred or several dozen geo areas, and we measure over time as you do more or less of different activities, what's the statistically significant lift on sales afterwards in those same areas. It's been done for forever, among the consumer goods companies, but the problem is it's generally been very, very expensive. We did a lot of work for a lot of years, and we've automated a lot of the data work involved in it so that we can do it for a tiny fraction of the cost, which has let us come into pharma and serve whole companies and all the brands in the promo grid and things like that. Okay, so back to Gandalf here. Before I proceed, who can spot the problem with this picture? 3 arms. Lovely. So while I was playing around and trying to prompt ChatGPT to give me this image that I wanted, I got one that I thought was perfect, and I was like, oh, wait, it did the 3-arm thing. And it frustrated me. I was like, I'll have to toss that one out. I was like, actually, no, I'm bringing that one back in. Because the 3-arm thing from ChatGPT illustrates a really important principle, which is that math by itself is only as good as the data you give it, in the way in which you give it, and with the questions you're asking. And if you don't give the right data and in the right way, it'll take shortcuts like this, where I said, have Gandalf hold a basketball and a staff. And it was like, well, normally you're going to hold the basketball with 2 hands, and you need another hand for a staff. So let's just go with 3 hands. And it calls to mind, this is from the books of the movies. It's a palantir. It was the seeing stone that they could use to look anywhere in the world and see what was going on if you knew how to control it. The problem was, if you guys remember from the movie, the little hobbit Pippin grabs a hold of it, and all of a sudden he gets captured by Sauron, the really bad guy, almost gives away all their secrets and hopes. Near disaster averted, everyone's okay. But afterwards, Gandalf has this comment, perilous to all of us, perilous to us all are the devices of an art deeper than we possess ourselves. So just as we've been talking about advanced analytics and the cool stuff it can do, I want to put this caution out here that math is really cool, and we can do a lot of really cool stuff with math, but if we're not careful with it, and if we don't take the time to understand a little bit what we're doing, then we can get ourselves into trouble. A really good example of that is that around 40% of academic papers are not replicatable. You guys have heard about the academic replication crisis, that across fields, people want to have a finding, or they want to be able to discover something, or they just have to get something published. And so people are routinely putting things forward that kind of stretch it, or they're kind of stretching themselves a little bit. So we need to be careful with this process. So how can we trust math and big data and analytics? Get the benefits that we were talking about earlier, but not lead our own selves astray. I'm going to suggest 3 main principles that we need to bring into it. Number 1 is humility and transparency. I'll get into that in a second. Number 2 is accountability. And number 3 is understanding. So on humility and transparency, one of the things that we've started doing in our studies with clients that I find very helpful, and I've hidden the actual findings here in this column, but across different categories of questions, we'll tell people, look, in this particular finding, we have high confidence, we only have directional confidence, or we don't have any confidence in any finding we can report to you, so test some more and we can do an additional test in 6 months and maybe come back and find things out. And the reasons for that might be, number 1, your data is not in great shape. You knew coming in that you brought in kind of dirty data in this area. So let's take this whole area with a grain of salt, and no matter what the model tells us. Number 2, how much did you actually experiment in this area? Were you basically doing the same thing all the time, or was there actually a bit of variance in the stuff happening in the field? Is it fair for us to make an assessment and a judgment off of this little tiny experiment, or was there an actual significant volume of experimentation? And then number 3 is consistency across different models or ways of looking at the problem. And so we'll only report high confidence when all 3 of these are really in good shape. And I can't stress this point enough. If you do cool data analytics and you give it to clients and you don't give some of this, you're going to give them a number of bad findings, and they're going to run with them, and it's not going to work out in 1 or 2 areas, and then they're going to lose trust. And there was no point to it. But if we can be humble and transparent about what we know and what we really know with actual high confidence, and what we're kind of only going to be directionally confident in, that's really helpful. The second thing is accountability. So another thing that we've started doing is automating our models so that they run on a regular basis, and so that we compare actual sales here in black as they come in every month against what was forecasted here in red. Because ultimately, if the understanding we're putting forward of what causes effect is true, then that should manifest going forward in the future as you actually do things. And so this accountability of comparing our forecasted impact off of what we've learned against the actuals is really important. And then the third thing that we'll spend a couple of minutes here doing and helping with is I think it's very important to empower leaders to challenge analytics. Most of the people in these two rooms have no background in advanced analytics or in econometrics or statistics or any of the related fields, and they shouldn't, because most people don't like that stuff. But it's part of our world, and so it's reasonable that we who come from that kind of a background don't stay speaking a foreign language, but we come down and we explain things in a way that is accessible to people so that they can use their sense of what's going on to challenge us and feel like they're on equal footing. So that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about for the rest of today. So first, I want to just go through the basic logic of measuring marketing ROI. Like, what should we demand, or what should we expect if this is to be done well? And we'll start with the foundational question. If I do one more or one less of X, field visit with this kind of doctor, email to that kind of doctor, this kind of customer journey, whatever it is, what impact does that have on sales? So first, we need to make sure that we're looking in the right geography. So if we did the visit in Delhi, presumably the sales impact should be somewhere in the vicinity of Delhi. Number two, we need to be looking in the right time frame. So it's not the case that if I visit a doctor and we have a great chat, that the only impact that's going to have is on a prescription made tomorrow or today, but there's a decay over time of that doctor's memory of our good conversation. And being able to appropriately measure how long that decay is really important in terms of giving that promotional activity a fair chance to make its mature impact on sales over time. We also have to control for other sales drivers. So the whole omnichannel chat, there's lots of things going on. And we need to have enough data points in our sample with different combinations of doing just this or just that, or a combination, or a lot of this and a little of that, or vice versa, to be able to give ourselves a fair chance to measure the independent contribution of each of these things or their collective contributions together. Different control variables. So at a very basic level, that'll be like seasonality. But also if we have new competitors enter the market, or if someone changes their price, or if someone has a stock out, or if we have new distribution channels, or any of these things, these are going to change sales, and we better measure and control for those things, or else we're going to get a bogus result in the thing we're trying to measure. And then finally, and very importantly, brand equity. So I hate last-click attribution models, which is not in your industry area, but like any model that I've seen that credits 100% of sales to different marketing channels, you know it's a lie. Because you know that existing brand equity and good experiences with products brings with it some customer loyalty in the future, and so the model needs to be able to accurately measure and control for the contribution of past sales to today's sales, independent of whatever we're doing today. Number of other kind of more granular things, but these are some of the main big picture things that logically, if we're going to measure the impact of something, we got to look in the right time and the right geo, control for the contribution of other drivers, control variables, and make sure we're controlling for brand equity as well. So what's in the pharma analysis toolbox? The two old ones would be A/B testing and carryover analysis. One that we see popping up a decent bit is multi-touch attribution, which is where you do either brick breaking or you got HCP level prescription data, but you have HCP level sales, and then you look at all the doctors where you're just doing X, or you're just doing Y, or you're doing X and Y, and how much do those accounts grow over time, and you're able to attribute things out like that. It's hard because most of the time, most companies can't get HCP level sales. National marketing mix modeling, we actually see a decent amount of this, where you take just the whole country, national sales over the last 2 or 3 years, and as we do more or less of different things, how much have sales gone up or down. And its cousin, which is much, much more granular and powerful, of geo-segmented marketing mix modeling, where you're doing that same over time analysis, the time series analysis, but across 50 or 100 or 200 different cities or geo areas in the country. So how do these different tools stack up? If we're looking at their ability to properly measure in the right geo, the right time, control for other activities, control variables, brand equity, and then really how much do they tell us? This is a scoreboard we put together. I'm happy to have a disagreement with anybody over the specifics. But A/B testing is a good, rigorous method, but it's going to give you, you have to set it up right, which we all know, and B, it's going to give you a fairly narrow bit of insight. Carryover analysis, same thing. It was good for a unichannel world where you're just doing field visits, but when you're doing multiple things, it can't get further than that. Multi-touch attribution does better than what I've shown it here. And I try to reflect that by giving it the credit here with how much you're able to learn from it. My issues with multi-touch attribution is that a lot of times it doesn't do a very good job of capturing geographic spillover effects, say from a specialist in the area who's on board to making an impact with a nearby GP. It can struggle with offline activities that aren't tracked doctor by doctor by doctor by doctor because you just don't have the data. Same thing with control variables, and can be the same thing with brand equity. If they're really well set up, they can account for these things, but often they're not. National market mix modeling, if you just have 24 months of the last 2 years, and then you have 5 different things that you're doing to drive sales, it's really easy to what's called overfit the model. And basically, you can kind of get any result you want within reason. It's not enough data points to really ask the question properly. But if you geo-segment the country to where it's not just one country worth of data per month, but it's one city versus 24 months, then you'll have thousands of data points and you can really dig in and get some good insights. So off the back of that, kind of just a general guide as to what's the ideal or right tool for the job and which other tools can do a decent job of it. If we're looking at launching a product in the first 6 to 12 months, A/B testing, absolutely do it. Design A/B tests from the pre-launch strategy. Multi-touch attribution can do a good job here. And again, I think geo-segmented market mix modeling is the best tool, but I'll quibble with anyone who wants to go for MTA. In general, just brand planning, these two do a really good job. If you want to take the entire promo grid and optimize the entire promo grid in terms of which doctors are getting visited more or less and with which frequency and things like that, this does a really good job. If you're piloting a new channel or a new campaign or a new XYZ, any of these 3 can do a good job. If you're looking to optimize a landing page or an email, that's the life that A/B testing was made for. And then if you want to personalize content, that is really where multi-touch attribution shines much better than anything else. Because you can get to the point of being able to say, look, for these particular kinds of doctors, this is the right kind of set of experiences that they need. For these kinds of doctors, this is the right kind of experiences that they need. I would compare the personalization versus the overall brand plan and promo grid planning. If you go back to sports, a team's identity, this is the way we play, this is the way we win, that's kind of right here. A game plan for a particular opponent, that's kind of the one right here. Both are really helpful, but you definitely want to know at least as, what's the right way for your brand or for your team to play. So I'll stop there. We've got an extra handful of minutes, or a couple of minutes. Any questions or yeah, shoot.
Yeah, sorry, this is just an ignorance question, so if everyone in the audience did that, if you could go back.
Yeah.
The difference between geo-segmented market mix modeling
These two.
and
No.
multi-touch attribution.
These two. Okay.
Is that literally just the difference between, the geo-segmented tells what that is, right? So it's more geographically specific.
Yeah, they're fairly similar in a lot of ways. The difference will be that you try to get down to an individual doctor level here, whereas here you'll be at like a city level. So here you'll capture more spillover effects, and you'll capture more offline or non-cookie tagged channels. And here you don't have to have doctor level sales data, whereas here you do need to have doctor level sales data.
And that's why multi-touch attribution is better for personalization at the individual level versus...
Yeah. Yeah, no, great question. Other thoughts, questions? Success. All right, guys. We'll be over. We got a booth over there, so if you have any other questions so shout out. The Daiichi guys are doing great stuff with MTA. Sanofi is doing great stuff with MTA. There are some people doing really good stuff with that. So there's some experience in the room. But anyway, we'll go ahead and wrap up now. Thanks very much.